Our judges today are Mr. Ian Stone, Independent Non-Executive Director, Tencent Holdings Limited, Ms. Elizabeth Thompson, Founder and Chairwoman, the Amber Foundation Limited, Mr. William Sheck, Managing Director, Head of Credit and Rates, Asia Pacific HSBC. Ready?
We do smile.
Yes, you may start now.
So are we ready to start?
Yes, you may start now.
K-pop is a cultural phenomenon that has grown so fast that it's conquered its home market and has gained a foothold in the rest of Asia and the West. However, with barriers to growth in both Asia and the West, growth has slowed. Today, we've been asked to look at where the K-pop industry should go next. The first key piece of insight that we'd like to share is that while it's a viable strategy for any individual K-pop company to expand by growing market share, in the long run, growth potential through this mechanism is very limited. In order for any one of these companies to have strong growth into the future, they must grow the size of the market.
Today, you have asked us, how can we grow the K-pop industry to achieve $13 billion revenue by 2020? We propose you can do this through moving to the West, and we have a set of strategies which will ensure your success by first captivating your Western audiences and then locking them in to ensure long-term revenue sustainability.
A grounding piece of insight that we'd like to share with you before we go further into this strategy is that every K-pop group is effectively a product with very, very high fixed costs. Return from this investment is unreliable and unpredictable. However, we don't think that this is actually a problem that needs to be solved. It's simply a factor that's endemic to this industry. We liken it to the movie industry, where large investments must be made and returns are unpredictable, but success is still possible.
We took a look at K-pop's existing presence globally. You have currently saturated your Korean home market and you have a significant presence in the rest of Asia. However, there are significant barriers present in the case, such as political issues that are difficult to overcome, and we see the greatest potential for growth coming from moving to the West.
In Korea, K-pop stars are trendsetters who set the trends in fashion and lifestyle for everybody in Korea. This translates to the rest of Asia fairly simply, because the cultures are similar enough that the people appreciate the same values. However, there's a barrier here in moving to the West in that the values and lifestyles are so different that those icons are not able to set the trends there.
Following on with what Micah has just said, the values of your Western listener and your Eastern listener are drastically different. Your Eastern listener appreciates uniformity and perfection in these K-pop groups. However, your Western consumer appreciates uniqueness in the artist's ability to innovate and generate music that is relatable on a human level. For example, Jennifer Lawrence is a successful celebrity because she is relatable and a human being rather than seen as a manufactured product. Therefore, in order to succeed, you must ensure that your strategies see you target the West differently than you are doing to the East.
Next, we'd like to look at some of the differences between the success of K-pop acts in the West and Western artists. There have been K-pop songs that have been extremely popular across the whole world. However, when we look at their success and what happened after that, we see that it was a one-off hit and that it wasn't able to drive the next song to be successful. With the most successful Western artists, we see constant hype being driven. We see that after a song is launched, that success translates to driving more success for their next act. It's capitalizing on this that's going to be crucial for K-pop to maintain a sustainable footprint in new markets.
Take Psy, for example. His #1 hit Gangnam Style was largely popular and went viral. However, since then, engagement with his music and new releases have been incredibly low in the West. Take Kanye West as an example for the Western celebrity. He has constant stream of engagement through his followers.
The way that this is achieved is with the flywheel that we're showing on the slide now. After the launch, that's not the end of it. We drive hype by all of the other things that go with it, bringing the stories together so that fans engage and then they're looking out for the next thing. In light of this, we present our strategy, which is all about entering the West with K-pop. Our strategy does not see Korea export its entire culture wholesale, but instead is all about making K-pop itself accessible to Western audiences by first integrating it into Western culture and then locking people in.
In light of this, our first strategy sees you integrate a three-pronged technique to integrate yourself to capture your Western audiences. The first step is to integrate K-pop music into recreational centres. The rationale behind this is that K-pop music is easy to appreciate, even though you may not have an understanding of Korean culture. We can all dance to the rhythm. The second factor we want to implement is collaboration with your Western artists. For example, Psy successfully collaborated with Snoop Dogg, and this is so we can get instant exposure to the Western artist's fan base. The third step behind this is to have product and TV song placement so we can slowly start to see K-pop integrate into part of Western culture.
The big picture of this strategy is that it's all about getting new fans in the West to understand K-pop and want to listen to it. We're doing this not by trying to make them understand Korea as a whole and understanding all of Korean culture like goes with K-pop in the home market, but making K-pop something that they see as integrated with the culture that they already understand. Our second strategy is about what happens next. After you've got those fans, if that's it, if that's the one hit, then there won't be further success. The strategies that we're going to talk about now are a few ways that you can lock those people in, make your galvanize your fan base so that they'll stay your fans and evangelize for you.
The first step is to create stories with English language that your audiences can resonate with. The second part of this is to launch mobile-based music games such as Tap Tap Revenge, which we are all familiar with. The third step is to host concerts immediately after any viral or any popular K-pop music that has a hint of success in the West. This is in order to secure your audiences and to lock in your fans early on.
There is a value extraction advantage to each of these strategies in that there are ways of making more money off the main product, but that's not the primary purpose. The primary purpose is that galvanization of our fan base, making them the most dedicated fans possible and ensuring that they'll stay with us. This has been an overview of our strategies, and we'll now pass you on to Noel and Jono to take you through the implementation of finance behind them.
Thank you, Micah and Emma. So let us recap what we have got so far. The strategy involves two parts: capturing a fan base in the Western market, and then securing this fan base. One thing to note is that you must capitalize on the virality. So we have a lot of viral hits coming out of Korea. These have generally views in excess of 50 million, and these come out quite often every year. So our two strategies hinge on these givens. So let us consider our first strategy of capturing the fan base. The first part of the strategy sees you partnering with gyms. These gyms need to have a chain focus, and they need to offer courses such as spin classes or Zumba classes. The reason for this is because these classes have an active, engaged audience. They don't really care what kind of music is playing, as long as it is fast and it keeps them moving and work up a sweat. In addition, these gyms also need to be located in health-focused regions and have an urban population. Examples of this are LA and San Francisco. The second part of the strategy next sees the collaboration section. You need to prepare yourself for collaboration with Western artists. One thing to consider is you first look for virality. So if you have a hit in excess of 50 million views, you need to prepare for collaboration, and you need to execute this within 3 months. The reason for collaboration is because it gives both the Western and the Korean artists access to the other market, and it also has sales bonuses and sales opportunities in the other market. As for which artists in the West to consider, you want to look for artists that have a high reach, so they produce hits in excess of 50 million views. You want these hits to be relevant, so there's 3 hits every year, and you also want the artists to fit with the group's personality.
Based on past trends, we see that there are about a dozen of these viral videos that come out of K-pop every year. We would look to proactively predict which ones of these based on our most popular artists, and as Noel mentioned, then quickly utilize the ones that do go viral to partner up with Western producers for new videos. Firstly, I'd like to focus on the dance part. The reason we think dances are really effective is because if you engage with a dance at one of these gyms, not only would you appreciate it yourself, but you might go and tell your friends. A good example of this is how our team somehow ended up doing a K-pop dance for the introduction skit for this competition, despite none of us having done that before. So we think that from these 10 dances that go through major Western gym chains, you'll be able to reach about 100 million people. Secondly, on the partner productions, we'd take those hits that go viral and look to immediately produce a partnership hit with a Western artist. If those were successful, we'd like to do the same thing within the next year and then again. In total, we think we'll be able to do about 50 of these over 3 years. Now, I've listed that around 250 million people will be reached through this. This is despite the fact that the average video will be about 10 million. However, there is about a 50% rate where people will be viewing the same videos, hence the figures that I've arrived at. However, this is also a good thing, as I'll mention on the next slide. Now, in total then, the big thing is that in order to become a fan of K-pop, you need to have engaged with it in multiple areas. You don't become a fan after hearing one song. 60% of the people that we reach will have heard at least 3 of them, based on those previous numbers. And then therefore, we think we get about 25% of them that might appreciate K-pop to become fans. Fans meaning they proactively go out and seek new K-pop rather than reacting to what their friends show them. In total then, that gives us 52 million fans outside of Asia.
The second part of the strategy sees you locking in these fans. This part has three steps. The first aspect is to get reality TV shows. The purpose of this is to humanize your stars for a Western audience. So, the shows need to have the following aspects. The stars must be fluent in English to get along with a Western audience. The cast of these reality TV shows must have a multicultural focus. K-pop artists must be themselves, and you must embrace flaws. These last 2 points are of key importance since the Western market has inherently different values to the Korean market. The second part of the strategy is involving creating music-based action games. This is quite simple. The example of Tap Tap Revenge being inspiring this part of the strategy. So you need to first look for a viral or a catchy tune and then implement this into a platform for people to game on. After this, songs that are not viral but are popular in Korea can be implemented onto this and added on, and people can experience more of K-pop. The final part of the strategy is regarding hosting concerts. So let's first consider where to host these concerts. You want them to be in high Asian American populations, an urban population who are young, and the purpose behind both our strategies, again, is capturing on the virality.
The key results of this strategy drive from 2 things. Firstly, by enabling these stars to be themselves, you make them relatable to the public. People can engage with their personality and therefore be interested to know what's going on between song hits. Then by providing these concerts, merchandise, and stories through TV and movies, you give them this opportunity to re-engage between song releases. We think then that out of those fans that you generated, 60% of them will be re-engaging. And then this is where the revenue is driven by. As people go to concerts, as fans go to these concerts and movies, we think you'll get about an average of $100 per year in revenue from them. And in total, This gives you an additional $3.5 billion in revenue by 2020. Together then, our strategies will see you grow from a current revenue of $7 billion to $13 billion, based on your status quo growth of around 10% per year and the additional $3.5 billion that our strategy will provide. Additionally, you'll have 50 million international fans, giving you a foothold for further expansion into the future. Thank you. That was the implementation and finance of our strategy. I'd like to now pass back to Micah and Emma to conclude.
We looked at the K-pop industry as a whole, and today the question is, how can the K-pop industry gain 50 million international fans to achieve $13 billion revenue by 2020? We propose that you target the West through first capturing your Western audiences and then locking them in the long run.
3 years from now, you will successfully have gained those 50 million fans. That's going to mean that you'll have as much revenue coming from the Western states as you do from your home market in Asia put together. In the long run, what this is going to mean is that you will not be reliant on continued success in any one market. This reduces your risk of not finding that next hit because you'll have fans who want to keep on listening. K-pop is going to take the world, and with this strategy, it will integrate itself into Western's culture to do so. Thank you. This has been our presentation, and we'll now invite questions from the floor.
Thank you very much. May we now pass it to the judges for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Don't have to what? Thank you very much for your presentation. I liked the fact that you put up the pie charts, which made it very simple for us to look at the potential markets. But one of the things that I noticed is that your Asian pie chart showed that you had only 50% of the market, say. And I think what worries me a bit about your ideas are the cost consideration and the time consideration. So I'm wondering why, when Asia's so close to Korea, that you wouldn't consider step one being, let's get more of the Asian markets, especially when anyone who's alive in Asia knows what the concert scene is like. And that you wouldn't make number two, this golden egg of the US, which probably has more risk in it than I think your presentation has given to it. So why not 50%, why not 40% more in Asia before the US, where your risk is undoubtedly much higher?
I completely agree that risk is much greater going into the US than expanding in Asia. However, the possible for expansion in the West is far, far greater than what can happen in Asia. If we accept that K-pop already has around 50% of the addressable market in Asia, that means that the theoretical maximum is doubling. We don't think that that's actually going to happen, mostly because there's competition from national groups and there's other culture happening within each individual country, and that means that going from 50 to 100 would be incredibly challenging. In the US and other Western markets, with only a tiny niche, it's possible to expand massively. Those markets are also far bigger because there's simply greater GDP per capita and greater media consumption.
Okay, so great presentation, yeah, very clear. And I think you pick up the point about the focus in the market penetration, Asia, US, things like that. But then, on the other hand, when it comes to the US market access, I do have a different opinion, because they are success, right? Psy, as you mentioned earlier, and the previous team as well, I think Gangnam Style, things like that. But then I think you continue to focus in the penetration strategy. But they're already a success in the past, Gangnam Style. Okay, why don't we reproduce, why don't we analyze, Psy again? Why don't we try to analyze Psy and try to reproduce Psy 1, 2, 3, just keep producing that formula rather than keep modifying the marketing strategy, which doesn't depend on it. It seems like I'm sure there are factors about it, but there was success before. Okay, so what is the magic of the success of Gangnam Style? Is it what is it, like an innovation or new ideas? What is it? I think there are success cases. Why we not mention about it and expand that?
In the case, it was mentioned that the success of Gangnam Style is largely based on the novelty of it. Psy was essentially mocking the K-pop industry due to some of its controversy surrounding the Gangnam region. And because of that, it is extremely difficult for us to then go ahead and replicate that sense of novelty. It's difficult to predict what sort of videos will resonate with your Western audiences and therefore go viral. So we don't propose that you replicate Psy. However, we want you to, when you see the opportunity for something, a glimmer of growth potential in the West, then we want you to capture that and then generate your long-term recurring revenues by locking in your startup fans.
Yeah, but why don't you do a market analysis before you come to the conclusion? Because my understanding about Gangnam Style is that horse dancing. You see, it may not be the idea about the story about where it is or something. You see, I think you might get that. I'm not 100% sure about that. So I think we had to go deeper into analysis about someone who makes such a big success. And then you then say, you know what? You know, I might think they might be wrong. It could be something. I think you should go deeper when someone makes such a success before you think about the alternative, right?
Look, I completely agree that it is important to look at where there's been success, how that can be replicated into the future. The position that we were coming from was more that there's a problem in that Psy created success once. That was great, but we think that there has to be something broader in order to create a success that can be regular and sustainable and stable.
I understand, but if it is successful, the idea is successful, it might not be fully leveraged yet. I'm not disagreeing to think about making a new car or something, right? If you make something that sells well, you can add a turbo and sell more, right? I mean, I don't think we're leveraging it fully enough. Maybe come up with a cow dancing and, right? So I don't think we fully leverage that idea, which has come up so successful. It's not even small, it's materially successful. So it deserves a further analysis before you jump into some other direction, right?
Yeah, it might not have been made clear in the presentation, but the novelty behind Psy's success was discussed in the case room, and our conclusion was that was, a matter of luck and chance that have resonated well with the Western markets and therefore difficult to replicate. So we proposed to do something a little bit safer.
Okay, and I think there's some truth in that. Certainly, knowing exactly what succeeds is often down to luck. Now, K-pop has been, it seems to me, an internet-enabled success through social media largely. And you're introducing alternative routes to market. I'm intrigued by gym. I'm not so sure of the average age of a gym goer, but I suspect it's not necessarily the target market of a natural K-pop. But you are looking at, I guess, enlarging the market. But how do you deal with that? These are alternative routes to market, very different from the way that K-pop has actually developed so far.
We absolutely agree that you shouldn't go away from the core way of generating hype from social media. So that's why our strategy looks at capitalizing on an initial hit from a K-pop team that gets big, and then we look to go in through those alternative methods and consolidate a fan base in Western markets. So I think perhaps that wasn't made clear, but we definitely think you should maintain YouTube videos and that kind of thing for K-pop hits.
I think I remain a little concerned about the costs of going to the U.S. and the potential for falling flat on your face. But one of the things that occurs to me is the phenomenal availability worldwide of radio stations that you can sit right here in Central and get a radio station from Denmark. Did you ever look at that type of marketing where you could actually sit at home without the problems of the cost of flying, the cost of setting up a new office, the problem of jet lag, the horrendous problems of going from Korea to somewhere that is 12, 15 hours away to, did you look at using not, social media? Yes, we all know about social media, but I mean, we're talking about effectively social radios where you could reach radio people in Africa, Denmark, Poland, Canada, Newfoundland, anywhere.
Absolutely. We definitely looked at going into your traditional radio stations to broadcast to a wider audience, and we do agree that is less risky. However, the issue here lies in that in radios, you cannot interact with the performers. You can only hear the music, whereas in K-pop, a large proportion of the value actually comes from the dance and choreography and the pure charisma of the dancers themselves. So the aesthetical factor.
What about Facebook? What about YouTube?
K-pop already has a fairly large presence in your traditional forms of social media, and we felt it was best to leave that alone and discover an alternative route to marketing.
One of the issues that is brought out in here is the ethical aspects of young contracts. And it seems to me that the West is probably a lot more sensitive to this than perhaps Korea or even Japan. So what impact do you think, or how would you control that impact?
Thank you. So for that impact actually is the reality TV show, the second part of locking people in by showing them what these people are real human beings. One thing, as we mentioned, you must focus on is telling your K-pop artists to be themselves and that we actually embrace flaws. This is completely critical. You need to change your current treatment of these artists because it just does not work in a Western audience.
Just harping on a little bit the cost, because you did a good analysis of the dollars. What is the cost of localization? You had the revenue impact. I didn't see a cost impact.
The reason we chose to focus on revenue is because the case framed it as about how do we grow K-pop globally. However, looking at the strategies that we've actually proposed, it wouldn't be particularly difficult. Most of them relate around partnerships, which are not, we're not putting money into these. There's a mutual benefit for the gyms and us to have the dancers there, and same thing with the Western producers. So we think the cost of the strategy wouldn't amount to more than about $20 million.
It's easy enough, I think, in the music industry to look at LA and San Francisco, but I wonder really if that's creative enough or if it's broad enough. I'm certainly no music industry expert, and I just feel like if I was an investor in your business, I would be challenging you to think broader and wider and maybe cheaper. Cost in business is a very, very important part of business. And when you say $20 million, my body starts to shake. So, I'm just wondering where else in the world you could think about and you could go. I mean, why not Auckland? Isn't there a great music scene in Auckland? What about Sydney? What about places that mean your overall cost base is being kept lower?
Absolutely. The reason why we chose San Francisco and New York as being your startup concert places is not actually because of the music influence it has, but mainly because they have a large amount of Asian immigrants existing, and therefore they are able to influence their friends and bring them into the K-pop network and appreciate K-pop. And the second part is because many Western countries follow American music trends. So that's the rationale behind not going to our home city, Auckland, or to Sydney.
I'm intrigued by your line, embrace the flaws. I'm not so sure K-pop could embrace flaws. The whole point is developing a perfect product. And as you rightly said, there's visual as well as voice.
By embracing flaws, we're meant to frame it as by embracing uniqueness, so unique qualities that each member can bring to the table rather than conforming with uniformity and absolute perfection. So we want to show that they are a relatable human being, maybe not facial imperfections, but showing that someone like Jennifer Lawrence can stumble and laugh it off herself, so she is a relatable human being that makes mistakes as well.
So like you talk about US all the time, yeah? So then what about Europe? I said that because the point is about the West, right? And then, I mean, are you concerned about some protectionism issues in US, and therefore you might change strategy into Europe? I mean, you didn't say anything about Europe. When you say West, do you actually mean, what do you mean by West? Like
Yeah,
US
I
and
think
US
there's
and
one more part to that, which is, you know, have you done any analysis of where there are large Korean communities? I mean, I think we probably all know there is in LA, but, you know, I don't know in Europe where large numbers of Koreans are, but I would have thought that was one of the first analyses that you would want to do.
Absolutely. So we considered where in the West this would be most effective in, and the reason why we established the US is A, we see them as being billboard influencers of music, and the second reason being that they actually have significantly more Korean immigrants than Europe.
So you actually did that analysis?
We briefly discussed that in the case room and decided US was the most sensible startup location.
In a bit of K-pop, I've
Yep. Unfortunately, time is up. Thank
just
you
to
very
say
much.
I've not seen an imperfect.
Thank you very much.